Hello, everyone. It's another weekend and another session of Microsoft Zero to Hero community. As you might know, we are part of Microsoft Learn, a community that connects learners to experts for building a more knowledgeable and robust community together. I'm Shahab, the host for tonight's session. I hope you have a great time wherever you are on this blue planet, whether it's morning or evening. And as you might have seen, it's .NET July. That means every weekend we will talk about .NET and C Sharp, and this will be the whole month. We will start today with getting started with Blazor, and our guest would be no one better than one of the go-to guys when it comes to asking questions or learning about Blazor. He's a Microsoft MVP, and he's the author of the book Web Development with Blazor, a practical guide into to building interactive UIs with C Sharp and .NET. As always, be respectful to each other, be patient, hear each other's opinion, and maybe there's something new and interesting for you there. So let's, without further ado, invite Jimmy on the stage. Hi, Jimmy.
Hi.
For accepting
Hi.
the invite and being here with us.
Nice to be here. I mean, what is better than to talk about .NET and Blazor on a weekend, right?
Yeah, and as a .NET enthusiast, I couldn't even imagine something better for myself. Okay. Then
What a fantastic intro you have. And I just realized that I have the same sweater as you had in the intro. So I'm not sure if that is just kind of getting the expectations right or if that's embarrassing. I have more than one shirt.
I'm
promise.
pretty much the expectations will be satisfied about Blazor. So let's see what's up new about Blazor and how, as a .NET and C# developer, I could get a start with that because I'm mostly myself a backend developer, and when it comes to dealing with JavaScript, tons of frameworks out there, and honestly, yeah, it's not my best part of like skills like to be there. But writing C# would be better if I could do that.
And that's what Blazor is all about, right?
Yeah, then let's get started. And the stage is yours. Just one good news for the audience. We also have an exam voucher, 50% off for any of the exams of the Microsoft, whether it's fundamental or advanced exams. And it will go to the person who asked the best question from Jimmy about Blazor. No pressure at all. And you have to select that person. So
Oh gosh, all right.
Okay, the stage is yours. If there's any questions, guys, you could just drop the question in the chat, and I will join the stage, and hopefully we could answer the question. I mean, G could answer the question because I don't know anything about Blazor that much. Great. Enjoy, and let's have a nice evening together.
All right, let's switch over to my slides here. So welcome to this talk about Blazor. This is one of my, favorite topics, of course. So Blazor, some people love it, some people haven't tried it yet. So I would love to hear in the comments who is using Blazor today, who wants to use Blazor, and perhaps who is a little bit unsure about Blazor. And please write throughout the presentation. I will pick a winner later on. So my name is Jimmy Engström. I work for a company called Cab Group here in Sweden. I'm a Microsoft MVP for 11 years now, and I've been running Blazor in production since the release back in 2019, I believe. I'm the co-host of Coding After Work podcast. We have a Twitch channel, we have a YouTube channel, and we met a lot of people when we were out speaking at different conferences. And we thought, hey, you know what? Maybe we can bring that back. So that's why we started our podcast. So kind of get to know the people, all the conference speakers, basically. We are doing a Blazor call for paper site, or at least we used to do that. It's been a while. We just moved houses. Well, it was a year ago, but as we still have unpacked boxes or packed boxes. So I'm going to state that if we still have boxes, we are not done moving. So this is actually the new studio. We have a studio totally painted in chroma key green. So this is where we're going to continue doing some content. And as we already mentioned, I've written a book about Blazor, this one, a second edition, this one, and a third edition, this one. And these are the only 3 books with raccoons on the cover, or Blazor books with raccoons on the cover, which is, of course, the most important part. I've done a course for Dome Train, a getting started one, a deep dive, and also an authentication one. If you use this code Jimmy20, you will get 20% off, but I also believe there's a summer thing going on, so I think all the courses are 30% off currently. So please stop by and learn more about Blazor. But enough about me. Let's talk about this guy. This is Steve Sanderson. And at NDC Oslo back in 2017, Steve had a WebAssembly talk. It was called Web Apps Can't Really Do That, Can They? So Steve thought, you know what? It would be kind of cool if I could show .NET running inside of the web browser. So Steve found an open source project with the C# runtime. So we took that one, compiled that to WebAssembly. We're going to go into depth with all of this in a bit. So when Steve takes the stage, he has working IntelliSense. He has C# running inside of the web browser. He even had the name Blazor. And the really cool thing with Steve is that you might remember Knockout. This was a web framework that actually came out, I believe, a month or so before Angular, and did basically the same thing. So Steve took all the things that he had learned doing Knockout to create Blazor. So you're going to see that things are very similar to Angular, Knockout, React, and so on. So let's talk, what is Blazor? What is up with this? Well, Blazor is a web UI framework. It is very similar to Angular and React, or Vue, or whatever it may be. It uses Razor syntax, so it's basically a mix between HTML and C#. And it enables us to write interactive web applications using C#, which is the most fantastic part. So why is Blazor awesome? Well, I saw a post on Reddit that embodied my thoughts very well. So it said, this feels like cheating. I feel like I'm getting away with something. And it shouldn't be this easy to build sites. And this is exactly my feeling. When I saw Blazor for the first time and I tried it out, it was just so easy to get started. All of those things that I hate about web development was not gone, but most of it was gone. So for me, everyone is not comfortable with JavaScript, me included. But the nice thing with Blazor is that we're not switching between JavaScript, TypeScript, and then a C# backend. There's no other frameworks involved, really, because this is part of ASP.NET. There's no extra skills involved. I don't have to learn React, Angular, Vue. I can just keep writing my C# code. At my former workplace, we were doing someone or another company bought parts of our company. So that means that we were shipping customers over to this new, or this other company, I should say. So my colleague, my former colleague, sat down with the developers of from the other company. And that developer said, well, I just created a quick site using Blazor. And my former colleague was like, oh, nice, you're using Blazor. I'm interested. Why are you using Blazor? No, I'm just using it for this site. I work with React normally. So my colleague was like, why did you use Blazor then? Well, I just needed to get something up and running fast. So even a well-seasoned React developer thought that doing it in Blazor would get things started faster. It would get this site up and running faster, which is honestly mind-boggling to me. I'm not saying that this is true for everyone, obviously not, but if it's true for some, there might actually be, you might actually be more productive switching to Blazor from other frameworks. Now, I read somewhere that Blazor is for developers that don't want to learn new things. And that is definitely not the case for me. Now, there's a saying, misfortune never comes alone. And for me, that is NPM, Webpack, TypeScript, JavaScript, Node.js, Bower, Angular, React, all of these other things, all of these technologies or tooling that I need to learn. You can only be the best at one thing. And for me, I've kind of shifted that into C#. I'm trying to be or not be the best one, but I'm trying to be best at C#. So for me, it's all about removing clutter, removing all of those things that I don't want to put time into. And I can focus on one language. I was contacted by a guy on Facebook. So, are you using Blazor? I don't know who it was. He friended me and I accepted. Because I talk at a lot of conferences, I might have met this person. He might want to talk about something like Blazor, for example. So he asked me, are you working with Blazor? And I'm like, yeah, I am. Never gonna be a thing. Okay, this is okay. We're doing this kind of thing. Okay. I actually don't know if he had his arms crossed or not, but well, perhaps he did. So I asked him, why would you say that? Why don't you think Blazor is going to be a thing? It's never going to beat Angular or React. Now I'm pretty sure he had his arms crossed. But that is not the point. It doesn't have to replace something else. There can be more than one. This isn't Highlander. So it's not that we need to get rid of something to give something else a little bit of space. So one of the common misconceptions is that Blazor is WebAssembly. When we're talking about sessions like this or books or whatever it may be, we're often talking about WebAssembly. WebAssembly is the way to run Blazor. But the most popular way of running Blazor is actually Blazor Server. We had Steve Sanderson on our podcast, I believe it was 2 years ago or even 3 years ago. And he saw the same thing. Blazor Server is more widely adopted than WebAssembly. Now, granted that the Blazor Server version of all of this came out earlier. So I just want to mention this. So you think, when you're thinking about Blazor, don't think just WebAssembly. There are other ways of running it as well, which we're going to come back to in just a bit. Now, I want to kind of spend a little bit more time to talk about server, and we're going to talk about hybrid as well. So let's spend the next couple of minutes to talking about the different hosting models that we can run. So basically, there are 3 interactive hosting models. And we're going to come back to what that actually means. But we have Blazor Server, we have Blazor WebAssembly, and we have Blazor Hybrid. We're not going to spend a lot of time on Blazor Hybrid, but I think it's good to mention that as well. So when it comes to these different hosting models, it is only really the difference between what you can access. So for example, if we're running on the server, we can access the database directly. We can use the server's CPU. When it comes to Blazor WebAssembly, we have access to local resources, so our local web browser, our local disk, our local CPU. And when it comes to hybrid, we have access to things on the phone or things on the desktop, not only through a web browser, but also through direct access to them, which is kind of cool. So let's talk about Blazor Server for a moment, so that we know how these different render modes work in the background. So what is actually happening when we're using Blazor Server is that we're running some kind of Razor component, a component that will output some kind of HTML and have functionality as well. So let's say that we have, on top of that, we have Blazor. And inside of Blazor, it's going to create a render tree. So let's say that our Razor component has a heading and a button. So it's just rendering HTML and outputs that into Blazor, into the render tree, so the server knows what this page should look like. Great. Now on the browser side of things, we have the DOM and we have a little piece of JavaScript. The JavaScript will connect with SignalR to the server. And now the server knows that, okay, I haven't sent anything over, so the DOM is empty at this point. So it's going to send over the things that it knows the browser doesn't have yet, and then the JavaScript is going to update the DOM. Cool. Now let's say that I click the button up here. The event is going to go over JavaScript, over SignalR, and into our Razor components. Our Razor components are going to run something. In this case, it's a very, very subtle update. I'm going to change the Blazor rules from a Z to an S instead. So again, the server knows what it has. It's comparing that to what the browser should have, and knows that, well, the only thing that changed is the Blazor rules part. So it's just going to send over that part. Now, this is not a complete representation of everything, because it's actually not sending over that H1 tag and all of that, but it's basically this that's going to happen. It's just going to send the change over, which is the good part. And then the JavaScript will update the DOM. Cool. When it comes to Blazor WebAssembly, we first need to kind of understand where WebAssembly comes into all of this. So first we're going to talk about JavaScript. So JavaScript will first get downloaded. It will get parsed. It's going to get compiled, and then the JIT interpreter is going to be able to run the code. With WebAssembly, we can kind of bypass some of that stuff. So WebAssembly the JIT interpreter can run WebAssembly directly. So we don't need, well, we still need to download it, but we don't need to parse it, we don't need to compile it. And WebAssembly is also faster than JavaScript. We can reach almost native speeds. So technically, it should be faster as well. So what Microsoft did was that they took the mono runtime and they compiled that to WebAssembly, the runtime. Then the runtime runs your DLLs and the framework's DLLs. And this is where things get kind of cool, because it's running your DLLs. It's not running WebAssembly, it's your DLLs is running inside of WebAssembly. So when I first heard about this, my initial reaction was like, ew, it's running the whole framework inside of the web browser? And then I realized that, wait a minute, it's running the whole framework inside of the web browser. It is pretty cool. And there are downsides to this, and we're going to come back to that later on as well. In .NET 6, we got something called AOT, so ahead of time compiled. So basically, what we will get is that we are taking all of these DLLs and getting those, we're compiling those, or transpiling perhaps, or compiling them to WebAssembly. So the .NET.wasm is going to be much bigger. The initial download is going to be larger, but it's going to run faster. Now, I don't think you really need this, because in most cases, Blazor is very smart. It's going to handle all of that for you. So it's going to work pretty good. But but if you have something that is very, very CPU intensive, you're going to update the screen many, many times, you might want to use ahead of time compile. But don't use it unless you have to. All right, so let's go back to our server side. This is how server-side Blazor works. That's the slide we just saw. So what is happening here is that if we're comparing this to WebAssembly, it is all about where things are running. Instead of running on the server, we're now running everything inside of the browser. We're running inside of .NET.wasm, same Razor components, same Blazor, same render tree. Instead of SignalR, we're using JavaScript interrupts. We get a little piece of JavaScript and we're updating the DOM. So it's all about where things are running. In .NET 8, we got some new stuff. We got something called static server-side rendering. We got streaming server-side rendering, per component render mode, and also auto render mode. Now, why are we talking about .NET 8? Well, I mean, we're now on .NET 9, and we're very close to .NET 10. Well, in .NET 8, we got all of the different render modes, and it changed the space of Blazor a lot. So this is why .NET 8 was is very important for Blazor. So let's take a look at these different things. So static server-side rendering, that's where the browser makes a request. The server then generates some data. That's good. And then we're going to send back a response to the browser. All done. If I click the button here, nothing is going to happen. That's kind of the thing with static server-side rendering. So we're not getting any interactivity. And that's why I talked about server, WebAssembly, and hybrid are those interactive render modes. So this is a render mode that is not interactive. Then we got streaming server-side rendering, and this one is pretty cool as well, because here's what's happening. We are doing a request from the browser to the server. The server renders something, and then perhaps it pops away and downloads or gets some data from a database. So while the database is gathering information, it can send over what it already has. So we get this feeling of interactivity, but it's really not. There's no SignalR involved, there's no WebAssembly involved, but it's pushing content when it has it. It's not actually the first one is a response. But as soon as the database is done, you're going to have some data. And then that data is going to be pushed over. It's not going to be pushed over with another response. It's actually handled much better. But the gist of it is that the data is then going to be pushed over from the server onto the client. So we're going to get that feeling that we're going to update some segments on the page, but we're not really interactive at this point. Then we have per component, which is something that I kind of urge you not to use, not yet at least, because I'm not going to go into depth, but the dependency injection gets pretty tricky, because we're going to have one dependency injection when we are pre-rendering content. We're going to have one dependency injection when we are using server, and we're going to have one dependency injection when we're using WebAssembly, and we can't share between them. There are ways around that, but the complexity increases a lot. So the per component model is that we can run WebAssembly parts or components inside of one page, and we can also use SignalR. And we can combine this. One page can be static, one page can be streaming, one page can be server, one page can be WebAssembly, or we can have a page that mixes all of these different render modes. But I would recommend pick one, stick with that one. That is going to be so much easier. And then we have auto mode, which is it navigates around some of the problems with Blazor. I'm going to come back to that as well. So what is actually happening here is that the first time we visit the site, SignalR is going to kick in. So we're going to get a fast, responsive site using SignalR, and then in the background, WebAssembly is going to get downloaded. And the next time we visit the site, WebAssembly is going to take over. So we get rid of that initial download time with WebAssembly, and we get an interactive site fast, and then we can switch over to WebAssembly. And in this case, we don't mix anything. We still need to think about how we build our site, because it's going to work. It needs to work both with SignalR as well as WebAssembly, but we don't have to handle those two scenarios at the same time. So what about Blazor Hybrid? Well, let's go back to the WebAssembly slide here. So Blazor Hybrid, again, it's all about where things are running. Now we're running inside of iOS, Android, Mac OS, Windows, or Tizen. We're running inside of .NET MAUI. And We're running on top of .NET or .NET for iOS or Android. But we have the same Razor components. We have the same Blazor. We have the same render tree. We're not using JavaScript interrupts or SignalR, but it's communicating with the DOM. And we can mix this with native components as well. So we can have a native tab, for example, tab bar, switching between the Blazor content. So this means that with the same Razor components, same DLLs, same everything, we can reach the web using Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly. We can use .NET MAUI for iOS, Android, Mac OS, Tizen, and Windows Desktop. And thanks to the web view, the Blazor web view, we can also reach WPF and WinForms. It is a really, seriously, really great time to be a Blazor developer, because we can do all of these different things by just learning Blazor. So let's take a look at the demo.
We have a question, but I don't know if you want to tackle the questions during the presentation, or should we have like a dedicated session at the end?
Well, we can do one now. This is a great place to do it.
Okay, since I'm interrupting. So the question is there any plan for Blazor to support automatic component refresh based on global events, like global state changes, without requiring each component to manually subscribe and call state has changed method?
Great question. Not that I know. Basically, the problem with Blazor is that, well, on the server, you would, let me see here if I'm, well, you would still need to kind of subscribe to it and do state has changed even on the server. In WebAssembly, well, then you would probably need to get SignalR up and running and get things pushed from the server to the client. But as far as I know, there's no plans of handling that, as of now at least.
Okay, thank you. Then let's continue.
All right, so demo time. I like puns, so I've called this demo Mana Mana, because what we're going to do is we're going to do a to-do app. I'm so sorry, I really like puns. So let's jump into my Visual Studio over here. Now, the nice thing about Blazor is that we can mix things. So right now we're looking at the to-do list.razor file. So here's where we're going to build our Razor or our to-do list. So what I have in the background is that I have an API. It's up and running, I hope. Yes, it's still up and running. So I have this, that is actually not the one. You see, there it is. So I have this server currently running in PowerShell. So what we're going to do is we're going to build our to-do app. And I got, in here we got some, let me show you that file as well. I know that you can't really see my, where's that one? There it is. So I have a shared project here. Let me, I can zoom in just so that you see the project structure here. So I have the web app template, and that's the template that I would argue that you want to use. We also have the WebAssembly standalone template. I'm not going to go into depth with the difference between the two, but the web app template is the one that you probably want to use because it has all of these really nice features. So inside our manamana.shared, so I'm taking all of the Razor files and I put them in a shared library. And inside of there, we have our to-do item. So our to-do item is just an ID. A is done, title with some attributes attached to it, and a description. That's it. Let's jump back to our to-do list. So to have a list of something, we need a list. That's at least what I'm thinking. So let's make a list. A list of to-do items. And it's just going to be a new list like that. Great. Now, to be able to get our items, we need to add a to-do service. Now, the to-do service is just a service that, or a class that makes the calls to the database, or the API, and then to the database. So let's add that. And then we're using something called an inject directive. So we're going to say to-do service, and I'm going to call it service, like that. So we're using dependency injection to add that service. Perfect. Then we're going to add a on-initialized async. And inside of that, we're going to get the items, set the items, and we're going to await the service dot get items. Like that. So we're simply using the service, getting the items, and adding them to the items over here. So now it's time to add some items or show the items. I was actually running the project at the same time, so that's why Visual Studio was arguing with me. So let's add some items. So we're going to use the virtualize component, and this is something built into to Blazor. So the virtualize component is going to render everything inside of it. So inside of the virtualize component, we have a template. So it's going to render that, but it's only going to render the amount to fill the screen. And if you have more items, it's going to fill that with a div. And if I scroll, it's going to move the items and then add a div on top and continue to have the div on the bottom. So it's only going to render the components that is inside of the view, which is going to make the site more performant. So we're going to say items equals, well, our items. We're going to say context item. So this is basically a for each loop. So I'm saying var item in items in this case. So the context is the variable that I can use inside of our virtualized component here. So we're going to add an input checkbox. We're going to bind that to is done. And when I click it, I want to run the update item method, which we're going to come back to in just a bit. Then we're going to have a link. We're going to have a link to to-do/item ID. And we're going to show the title. We're going to have a button. So by default, Blazor is using the Bootstrap templates. Bootstrap, I don't even know what version. So we're going to have a BTN for a button, and then we're going to have a BTN danger, because this button is a little bit dangerous. This is going to run the delete item method. And we're going to say delete there, like that. And then we're going to close everything off and fix the indentation. There we go. So we have this virtualized component. I could have just done a for each loop here, and it would work just great. But for this one, I want to show you that the virtualized component is out there, which is really, really cool. All right. So let's see here. Let's take a look at our update item and delete item methods. So our update item is going to run the service, and it's going to run the update item method. So it's going to grab the item and just update it on the server. On the delete item, we actually have a piece of JavaScript here. Ooh, but it's okay. The really nice thing when it comes to Blazor is that we can use JavaScript if we need to. So in this case, we have a function, showConfirm, which is showing a JavaScript confirm message. So inside of our to-do here, we can insert or use an IJS object reference. And we're going to await the JS runtime. We're going to invoke the import command, and we're going to import the content mana.shared pages to-do list .razor.js, the JavaScript that I just showed you. And then we're going to run that one. So we're going to invoke that JavaScript. We're going to run the method showConfirm, and we're going to show the message, do you really want to delete this? And if we do, we want to run the server or service delete item, as well as remove that item from the list. And then we're going to call state has changed. So to go back to the question that we just had, sometimes we need to add state has changed to make Blazor understand that you need to update the DOM. In this case, we don't know when the JavaScript is going to come back, so we might not run on the UI thread anymore. So that's why we need to do that. And as you can see, the JS runtime is red squiggly. That's because we don't have that injected just yet. So let's add inject IJS runtime, and we're going to call that JS runtime like that. So let's make this a little bit more fun. Let's add a title here as well. So I'm going to add a h2, my items, and then we're going to do an @ sign. So the @ sign gets us out of HTML world into C#. So now I can continue writing C#. So now I'm saying items dot where is not done. So all the items that is not done, I want you to count them and end that h2 like that. So if I now would run this, so as you can see, we can mix and match C# and HTML. We can have the code like this inside of the web browser, or inside of the Razor file, or we can use code behind if we want to. So let's go to our to-do list here, and boom, everything explodes. So let's pop into our trusty development tools here. And as you can see here, it's actually, it's not giving us a lot of data here. Because basically what happened was that it ran on the server, it loaded the home link, and then when I started the navigating, it's now navigated to another part of the site, but now I have all these, my configuration does not allow to show the error message. But if I instead would reload this page, so if I would reload this page directly, if I would go to this link, you see that we're getting a very nice error message. There is no registered service type for the to-do service. Now, this is because the first time we ran this, it's running Blazor Server. I think this is I think is running auto. So the first time SignalR, the second time WebAssembly. So we can try that theory. Let's go back to, I'm going a little bit off script here, and let's see if that's true or not. If I reload this page, we should be running WebAssembly. It is breaking, and the error message is now a better one, or the same error message. So cannot provide a value for the property service. So this is, now we're running WebAssembly. So we're getting these nice C# messages, even though we're running as WebAssembly inside of the browser. Okay, so it says that we cannot instantiate the service, and this is by design because I wanted to show you the error message. So we can pop into our web app here, program, and in here we need to add that service, and we also need to add an HTTP client. So let's add an HTTP client and also a to-do service, like that. Now sometimes, in this case we didn't even get the option, sometimes hot reload will just pick this up and we will be good to go.
Well, that's great. Speaking of hot reload, I think we have like a question. Is there any news about improving hot reload for Visual Studio? I think this is like one of the most questions asked recently.
Yes.
In Blazor.
This one and is Blazor Silverlight? That's the two questions. Is there any plans? Yes. Microsoft is doing a lot of stuff when it comes to hot reload. Performance-wise, stability-wise for .NET 10. So there's going to be a lot of improvements when it comes to hot reload. I'm not sure how much they're actually going to be able to ship, but I know that they have already done a lot of stuff that's... I don't know if it's in there yet or if it needs to be a little bit closer to the release, but there will be stuff happening and it's going to work better, at least according to Microsoft.
Okay, amazing. Thank you.
So let's pop into our to-do list here, and it's still breaking. Why is it still breaking? Let me restart that again. My API is not up and running. Let's see. Oh, it actually broke at some point. So let's go back here. But this is a great opportunity. So I have built a something called Blossom extension. So it's an extension for Visual Studio that makes it a little bit easier to do some basic Blazor tasks. And one of those things are right-clicking here and just run .NET Watch. Because going back to hot reload, I've noticed that it's often a little bit better to run .NET Watch instead of running debug mode in Visual Studio. So that's why that feature came about. So let's try this again and see if it works. Drum roll, please. Let's see here. There we go. Boom. So this is actually in Swedish, I see. Show Blazor WebAssembly and show render modes. So we can go in here, we can click that one. Let's change this to show. Show render modes. Same thing down here. There we go. Save item. Let's go back to the list and it's updated. Now, the cool thing here is that if we take a look up here, we have my items. We got 2 items. And if I click this one, it's now 1. It's now 0. I haven't said that I changed this value, but Blazor picks that up automatically. And if I click delete here, you'll see that we get a JavaScript pop-up saying, do you really want to delete this? And I can say cancel, or I can say yes, and it's now gone. So we got these really nice and simple ways to do interactive web applications using Blazor. And if I were to, let me see here, if I would go to my items here, and I would remove the title, you'll see that we get these annotations saying, you know what, you need to add the title to this. So let's go 1, 2, 3. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's saying, hey, you know what? It's actually a minimum of 5 characters. 4, 5, and save. And that worked. So we have all of these nice things, and these are thanks to the data annotations that you saw in the to-do item. So let's pop back to the presentation here for a while. So this is a demo. We're running the same application, same API, same components, and it's running inside of Blazor Hybrid here instead. So you see that we have all these options, same components, same DLLs, same shared project, and we can do all of that stuff. Now, we mentioned hot reload, common question. Is this Silverlight? Short answer, no, it's not. But one other very common question is component libraries. What component libraries should we use? And I get this question quite a lot from new beginners. So it's kind of like, oh, hello, I'm thinking about doing some Blazor development for the first time this weekend. What component library should I use? And I think when it comes to Blazor, it is very important to understand how all of this works. Build your own components to begin with. Don't do it as a always do it, but try to understand what your needs are. The nice thing here is that Progress Telerik, DevExpress, SyncFusion, Radsome, Blazorize, MatBlazor, MudBlazor, all of these different frameworks, and I even snuck in Blossom down here because I made a grid component, which is on GitHub, blossom.components, that is pretty, it's an okay grid component, to be honest. We used it for many years, and now when I switch jobs, we're not using it anymore. But I would say it's a good example of how to create a component. So check that out if you want to learn more when it comes to components. All right, so we talked about AOT, ahead of time compile. I want to show you a project that I've been working on, which is my ZXbox project. It's a ZX Spectrum project, or a ZX Spectrum emulator written in C#, running on top of Blazor, on top of AOT. So we can pick and choose. This is a 48K one. This is a 128K one. So let's start this one. You can see that it's starting up. Let's load again here. So I can jump, I can walk around. And this one is doing, I believe it's 25 updates per second. This needs to be ahead of time compiled. to be performant enough. We can play this game. This is how I grew up. This is the game that I played a lot growing up. And I made different versions of this emulator. I've done one for, well, Blazor. I've done one for HoloLens. I have done versions of this particular game with for Windows 8, for Windows Phone, for Xbox 360. And I have still, to this day, not beaten this first level yet. I just can't do it. So please check that out, zxbox.com. So the reason why it's called ZXbox is that ZX from ZX Spectrum and box from Xbox, because the first version that I did was actually on Xbox. And if you check out the Coding After Work YouTube channel, I have a full talk about building this emulator as well. But while we are still inside of my computer here, let me show you the plugin here. So let's zoom in just a little bit. So if I right click on a Razor, that did not, there we go. So if I right click on a Razor file here, the Blossom extension that I talked about earlier, we can get generate bunit test. We have create isolated CSS. We have create isolated JavaScript, or actually co-located JavaScript. We can create code behind. So it's going to create a code behind file. And we can find component usages. We can also go into our file here. Let me zoom in here. Let me actually zoom out just a little bit. There we go. I can select some code, and I can move that. I can extract some code. I'm not going to show you that one, but I can select some code and extract to a component. I can move namespaces to the import file if I want to. And I can also select some code and move that code from code behind to the Razor file. Let me pop into this link here. So the Blossom extension available on the Visual Studio Marketplace. It's free. It has all of these different functions. Move code behind to Razor file if you want to. So inside of Visual Studio, you can select some files, move that to code behind, but my plugin has the other way around, because I've found that having all the code inside of the Razor file is usually really, really nice to do it that way. So I wanted that feature for myself. And we also have Blazor routes, so we can find all the routes inside of our Blazor project, so it's a little bit easier to find all the things. So let's pop in here, Blazor, show Blazor routes. And these are all the routes. Now we have 2 projects in here, so that's why it's actually showing it twice. But we can double click on counter here, and we would go into the counter project. This comes from, we had a very large site. It was tricky to find it, to find all the components. We knew the URL, but what component is that? So you can find it that way. Well, we talked about the Blossom extension. So now, should we go all in Blazor? Well, it depends. What are your needs? But if the question is it production ready? Then the question is yes, it is. We've been running it in production since 2019. So it's definitely production ready. Should you invest time into exploring Blazor? Well, if you are on the ASP.NET stack, yes, absolutely. Will it replace Angular, React, or Vue? Also, yes, for some developers. Definitely not all of us, because there is room for more than one framework. So thank you so much for listening. I will stick around if we have any questions, and we have to announce the winner as well, right?
Yes.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for the presentation. We actually have another question left, which is a long one, but if I understood it well and could shorten it, is that with this auto mode, first we are running on the server side, and then it could switch to WebAssembly. And what would happen when in the server side, for example, we access a database, and then in the WebAssembly, would it be a threat to the server resources or not?
Won't it? No. Okay. So if I understand the question correctly, if you're running on the server, we can access the database directly. If you're doing a mix, I would probably always go through an API. That would make it easier, because that way you have an API, you access the API using the server and also through WebAssembly. The reasoning behind that, I used to be on the team, let's do two solutions here. Let's access the database directly when we're running Blazor Server, and through an API if you're using WebAssembly. I would prefer nowadays to do it the same way, so we can cache things inside of the API and stuff like that. So I would recommend using an API, even if we're using the server access or doing WebAssembly. And this question has as one layer on top of it as well, because we're talking about the auto mode. But with the web app template, what is going to happen is that it's going to pre-render on the server, and all of that data is going to be pushed over to the client, and then WebAssembly will load. Even if we're using auto, or if we're using WebAssembly only, but using the web app template. So we need to think about, we need to have it working in both scenarios anyways, if we want to use pre-rendering. And we do, to be honest, because that is going to be such much better user experience than leaving it out.
Cool. I have a question actually myself. While you were writing the code, there was one place, I think it was for the delete item, that you called the state has changed method to inform the Blazor engine probably that something has changed in my model, right?
Yes.
But when you were clicking on the checkbox, you didn't have to call the state has changed. What is the difference between these two modes, and when can I consider calling that method and when not?
Great question. When it comes to the on-click, for example, it is an, I'm always forgetting the name of, it's an event callback. So an event callback is something that is built into Blazor. So basically what it's going to do is, if we have an on-click, we have a couple of different events as well. But as long as it's an event callback, when it's done, it's automatically going to call state has changed. So the difference between the two, well, it is that if we would just delete the item, if we didn't have that JavaScript question, we wouldn't have to have state has changed, because at the end of the event callback, it's going to call state has changed. But since we were doing a JavaScript call and we didn't know when it's coming back to us, we cannot be sure that it's actually going to pick that change up. It might, but we cannot be 100% sure. One scary thing about state has changed is that it's going through the whole render tree, comparing it to what it should be, what it wants to be and what it used to be. And if there's no changes, well, there's no changes. But it's still doing that whole comparison. So you should definitely be aware when you are using it, and more importantly, you should not use it. So don't just add a state. I'm just going to add a state touch chains here and one there and there. I had a colleague that did that everywhere. And I'm like, why do you have a state touch chains there? Well, I don't know. It didn't update first, and then now I have that one, and now it works. But that is a huge performance issue. So don't have that unless you notice that you actually need to have it. Basically, well, we're off. We're doing something else. We are doing something else in another thread. We're coming back. Well, that's one moment when you might need it.
Okay, I don't know if this is a question or an information. In the upcoming LTS release, should we expect a shorter name for that attribute that preserves a state to solve re-rendering the CSS?
So there is an attribute, and I always forget the name of it.
Yeah, naming is hard. It's one of the two.
Yeah, let me actually quickly pull that one up because it's kind of a fun attribute. See if I have it in here.
In the meantime,
let's talk about that. When we are pre-rendering content, we are pushing all of the. Let's say we have a table of a lot of data, the weather, for example. So what is happening is that we have all that data, we're pushing that over, and then when WebAssembly takes over from the rendered content, it's going to render that again. It's going to do that call again to the API and get that data again. That is one of the problems with Blazor. But there is a way of persisting that using a persistent state. And let me, is this the correct project? I know that you can't see my screen. This is not the correct project. This is an old project. Okay, yeah, I don't remember the name right now. But it's a very, very long name, a very long attribute name that you just can slap on a property and it's going to handle all of that for you, which is like insane.
Well, I think Firouz is watching your YouTube video every time he wants to remember, or she wants to remember the name of the attribute.
Yeah. So what Microsoft has said is that it's going to change, but I don't know if it's going to change to a shorter name. Could be a longer name, but it is a very descriptive name, so that's good, I guess. And even though it's probably the longest in .NET history, I don't think it is shorter than the code you would have to write yourself. So I guess that's good.
We actually define aliases for the attributes, like in one file or something, and then reuse them. I'm not sure.
Oh, well, you could probably do that as well.
Okay, great. Then I don't know if there's any other question from the audience. I have my last question, if you don't mind, Jimmy. And it's regarding the SignalR connections. Do you have any measurement or any metrics, like how it would affect the resources on the backend? Because like when we are doing the server side rendering, or when we have like the streaming, we need to have an active SignalR connection from our clients to the backend server. And how does that scaling work, especially because it's not about the front end application scaling and performance. It's also about the resources on the backend.
I don't have any numbers. I know that you can handle a lot of connections using fairly few resources, but the answer is always it depends, right? Yeah. But I mean, depending on what your site is, if you have a lot of data that is rendered on the page, well, all that data is stored in the render tree. So, and stored on the server. So whatever it may be, if you have a lot of data showing up on the screen, well, the state is going to become bigger as well. It depends, but you definitely need to be aware. And if the site is, if you have a lot of users and the amount of users is something that you don't control, I would definitely recommend going with either auto, which is just going to be temporarily SignalR, or go with WebAssembly.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I found the attribute name, supply parameter from persistent component state. That's the whole, I mean, it's descriptive, but it's fairly long.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so this server side rendering reminds me of like session state back in the days when we were using ASP.NET. No, not ASP. Yeah, ASP.NET web forms and things like that. That we had to store a lot of data on the server. Yeah. Okay, so I think we kind of need to wrap up the session. So Jimmy, if you have already chosen your favorite question or the best question from your perspective, please let us know. In the meantime, just I need to announce the thing that we have. So next week on 12th, we will have a talk from Stefan Puls about null and void, everything about nothing in .NET. So kind of we can control the $1 billion mistake maybe in our C# applications. Let's see. Looking forward to it. Don't forget to subscribe that on our channel. The link is also in the chat. So looking forward to that. Back to you, Jimmy. Sorry.
All right. So I haven't selected a favorite question, but we got a lot of questions. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name now, but Casimir Wittenberg.
Yeah.
So that's the winner.
Great. Then please contact us over our LinkedIn page, Microsoft Zero to Hero, and drop a message there. And we will give you the 50% voucher for all the Microsoft exams, whether it's fundamental or advanced. Thank you, everyone. And that's it for this week. And thanks, Jimmy, again for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you on our stage. And
thank you for having me.
Next week. Our pleasure. Bye.
Bye.